Welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Naila Shudra, and these are the headlines. Islamabad and Riyadh have agreed to establish the Pakistan-Saudi Supreme Coordination Council to further improve bilateral ties. Meeting his Pakistani counterpart Shah Mahmood Qureshi in Islamabad, Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud said the kingdom is looking to expand the dimensions of its relationship with Pakistan. On his part, Qureshi said there are immense opportunities for Saudi Arabia for investment in special economic zones in Pakistan under CPEC. The United States and Iraq have sealed an agreement to formally end the combat mission in Iraq by the end of 2021. U.S. President Joe Biden and Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi met at the White House. Biden told reporters that Washington will continue to train and advise the Iraqi military. South and North Korea have restored their hotlines after over a year in a bid to rebuild strained ties. South Korean's President Press Secretary Park Soo-hoon said leaders of the two states have exchanged multiple letters since April. North Korean state media termed the move a big stride in recovering mutual trust and promoting reconciliation. In Pakistan, the 73rd Martyrdom Anniversary of Captain Raja Sarwar is being observed today. He was the first recipient of the country's highest military award, Nishan-e-Haider, for the immense courage he showed during the war against India in 1948. Brazil has recorded more than 500 coronavirus deaths and nearly 19,000 new cases overnight. Meanwhile, Pakistan has logged 39 more deaths and more than 3,200 infections in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.1 million lives and infected over 194 million people. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back. Islamabad and Riyadh have agreed to establish the Pakistan-Saudi Supreme Coordination Council to improve ties. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud called on his Pakistani counterpart Shah Mahmood Qureshi in Islamabad. In a joint press conference, Prince Faisal said Riyadh wants to expand its relationship with Islamabad. He said both countries believe in solving issues through dialogue, whether it be Kashmir or Palestine. The visiting dignitary also lauded Pakistan's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Qureshi thanked the Saudi foreign minister for his stance on the Kashmir issue. He said the two sides have agreed to enhance their economic linkages and bilateral trade. Qureshi also urged Saudi Arabia to invest in the flagship China-Pakistan Economic Corridor project. The Saudi foreign minister is on his second state visit to Pakistan within a year. For more on this, we're joined by Minahil Ahmed, our correspondent, speaking to us live from Islamabad. Now, Minahil, the areas of cooperation, well, what were discussed during the meeting of the two foreign ministers and what progress could be expected going forward? Minahil, is my voice audible? Minahil, is my voice audible? I think we've lost contact with Minahil. We are going to move on to the United States and Iraq, where they have sealed an agreement to formally end the combat mission in Iraq by the end of 2021. U.S. President Joe Biden met the Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi at the White House. These were the first face-to-face talks as part of a strategic dialogue between Washington and Baghdad. There are currently 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq helping local forces counter what remains of ISIS. Biden said the counterterrorism cooperation will continue.
I think things are going well. Our role in Iraq will be as a dealing with not, it's just to be available to continue to train, to assist, to help, and to deal with ISIS as it arrives. But we are not going to be, by the end of the year, in a combat mission.
For more on this, we are joined by Mr. James Dorsey, a political analyst, speaking to us from Singapore. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Dorsey. Now, Mr. Dorsey, the United States and Iraq have sealed an agreement to formally end the combat mission in Iraq by the end of 2021. Is this a proxy war victory for Iran, and why?
Well, I think it was obviously the Americans were already withdrawing from Iraq. You've had major troop withdrawals before that in some ways were turned around or in any case suspended to some degree by the fight against the Islamic State. By and large, the fight against the Islamic State, certainly in Iraq, has been won by the international community. And therefore, the question is why why the United States would want to maintain troops furthermore in Iraq. I think that from the American perspective, it obviously is part of the rejiggering or recalculation of their commitment to the Middle East in general, and they are in the process of trying to negotiate a deal with Iran. So on lots of levels, withdrawing successfully from Iraq makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Dorsey, we have recently seen a reemergence of ISIS attacks in Iraq. With the United States combat forces exiting, do you see the situation worsening?
Well, I think that Iraq's problems are less the Islamic State as such, and much more the problems of governance, of corruption, of widespread discontent, of failure to having delivered so on economic issues and on jobs. U.S. troops aren't going to make the difference on that. So I think in terms of forcing the Iraqi government, and again, you have an Iraqi military with the associated pro-Iranian militias that is perfectly capable of fighting the Islamic State.
Mr. Dorsey, what policy shift regarding this region does this American withdrawal from Afghanistan and now from Iraq signify?
I don't know that this necessarily is going to constitute a policy shift. The withdrawal from Iraq is fundamentally different and in very different circumstances from the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan. You're not leaving behind a collapsing situation in Iraq. You're leaving behind a situation that needs a lot of attention, and it needs a lot of support from the international community, including from the United States, but it does not necessarily need U.S. troops.
Mr. Dorsey, thank you so much for speaking to Indus News. Now moving on, the Pakistan Army has returned 46 Afghan soldiers, including 5 officers, to Kabul. The military's media wing says the personnel were amicably handed over along with their weapons. In a statement, it added that the repatriation took place at the Nawabaz border crossing in the tribal district of Bajor. The Army says Pakistan will continue to extend all kinds of support to our Afghan brethren in times of need. The troops had requested safe passage into Pakistan after losing a military post on the Pak-Afghan border. The Army noted that in early July, it had given refuge to a group of 35 Afghan border forces under similar circumstances. Pakistan's National Security Advisor has left for an official visit to the United States. He is accompanied by the Director General of the Inter-Service Intelligence, Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid. The NSA office said Yusuf will hold talks with his U.S. counterpart, Jake Sullivan, and other Biden administration officials. It said bilateral ties, Afghanistan, and other regional and international issues are on the agenda. Yusuf will also be interacting with the Pakistani American community, U.S. think tanks, and the media. His visit is part of the high-level bilateral engagements between the two countries. In Pakistan, the 73rd Martyrdom Anniversary of Captain Raja Muhammad Sarwar is being observed today. Hailing from the city of Gujar Khan, he was the first recipient of the country's highest military award, Nishan-e-Haider. He showed immense courage during the war against India in 1948 and inflicted heavy losses on the enemy. In a tweet, the military's media wing paid tribute to Sarwar on behalf of the nation. Major General Babar Iftikhar said that Servo's sacrifice will inspire many generations of defenders. South and North Korea have restored their hotlines after over a year in a bid to rebuild strained ties. The North unilaterally severed them in protest against anti-Pyongyang leaflets in the South. The South Korean president's press secretary said leaders of the two states have exchanged multiple letters since April. In a statement, Park Soo-hyun said Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un agreed to restore the hotlines as the first step. He added that they also agreed to regain trust as soon as possible and foster progress on bilateral relations. North Korean state media termed the move a big stride in recovering mutual trust and promoting reconciliation. Meanwhile, in Pyongyang, Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un marked the 68th anniversary of the Korean War armistice. Beijing has opposed recent remarks by the British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace's remarks on the South China Sea. During a visit to Vietnam, Wallace rejected China's territorial claims in the area and backed a 2016 tribunal ruling. In a statement, China's embassy in the United Kingdom said these comments disregard historical merits and objective facts. A spokesperson said the irresponsible remarks sow discord among regional countries and undermine peace. Beijing also termed the tribunal ruling on the South China Sea as illegal, null, and void. The embassy rejected allegations that freedom of navigation is under threat in the maritime passageway. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Brazil has recorded more than 500 coronavirus deaths and nearly 19,000 new cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.1 million lives and infected over 194 million people. More in this report. Concerns over surging coronavirus infection due to the Delta variant have prompted the world to reconsider the path to post-pandemic normalcy. The UN has warned that pandemic is hitting conflict-ridden and impoverished countries much worse this year than in 2020. Amid rising vaccine inequalities, the World Bank announced a financing mechanism for developing states to purchase vaccines collectively through the COVAX facility. Over in the United States, a new study has found that a number of COVID-19 cases in the country may have been undercounted as much as by 60%. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden has announced an initiative to ban discrimination against people disabled by long-term symptoms of COVID-19.
And today, finally, I'm proud to announce a new effort, the first of its kind, to help Americans grappling with long-term effects of COVID-19 that doctors call long COVID. Many Americans who seemingly recover from the virus still face lingering challenges like breathing problems, brain fog, chronic pain, and fatigue. These conditions can sometimes rise to the level of a disability.
In Europe, Russia has given the green light for the clinical trials combining a shot from the AstraZeneca with a Sputnik V vaccine. Cases fell in the United Kingdom for the 6th day running to nearly 25,000, the lowest in 3 weeks. However, in Spain, new coronavirus infections continue to rise.
We are still seeing significant differences among the different age groups, and that is without a doubt due to the vaccination in people over 40. Now, the 14-day incidence rate is around 700 per 100,000 inhabitants in Spain.
In Australia, Victoria State has announced to lift a strict lockdown after curtailing the spread of COVID-19. However, neighboring New South Wales faces an extension of restrictions after daily cases hit a 16-month peak. Tunisian President Kais Saied has ordered a month-long nighttime curfew, banning the movement of people and vehicles between 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. Pakistan has registered 39 more coronavirus deaths and over 3,200 cases in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the death toll has risen to 23,087. The country's positivity rate has declined to 6.6%. The country has so far logged more than 1,011,000 cases. More than 928,000 people have recovered. Of about 60,000 active cases, over 2,700 are in critical condition. Besides, Pakistan has received 3 million more doses of the American vaccine Martyrdom through the COVAX facility. In India, 6 police officers and a civilian have been killed in clashes over a border dispute between Assam and Mizoram states. More than 70 others were hurt as tensions on the border escalated. Central forces have now been deployed in the area to bring the situation under control. Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sharma said 6 Jawans died while defending the constitutional boundary. Mizoram Chief Minister Zoramthanga said that his government deeply regrets the needless injuries. This latest clash was the culmination of tensions simmering between the locals of 2 neighboring villages. A recent encroachment drive by the Assam police is believed to have added to the tensions. For more on this, we are joined by Shahzad Chaudhry, a former ambassador speaking to us from Islamabad. Thank you so much for speaking to Indus News, Mr. Chaudhry. Now, Mr. Chaudhry, we haven't seen any violent clashes over this issue in a long while. Do you believe Prime Minister Narendra Modi's decisive and aggressive approaches is shaping the tone in India, and it has anything to do with this flare-up?
Yes, unfortunately, it seems so, because Narendra Modi's tenures, the 2 tenures of his first and the second tenure, has only given rise to extreme polarization in the Indian society. And many underlying and simmering feuds and disputes have begun to emerge as very prominent ones, as is evinced by the recent, in fact, the ongoing saga at Mizoram and Assam. So yes, it's very obvious. The land itself, the 7 states, the 7 sister states, as they call these 7 states which are enclosed in that Assam area, also has a history of insurgency. And so, therefore, it is always on a boil, sort of a boil, simmering. And so, therefore, the moment the attention goes haywire in terms of Mr. Modi's central focus being diverted to internal turmoil within India, to his Hindutva mandate and his agenda for the Hindutva, and then of course his external manipulations of geopolitics within the region and against Pakistan. Obviously, the attention is off, and the Interior Minister, Mr. Amit Shah, who's responsible for this kind of control over states and their responsibilities and their problems, is unable to do so. So yes, I agree with you that the polarization that Mr. Narendra Modi's poor politics and bad politics and toxic politics has created has led to this kind of an emergence within the Indian state. Although states will have problems with each other, but these are not something that are external to India. But when you begin to see these things emerge within India, obviously you realize the amount of toxicity that has gone into the entire body politic.
Mr. Chaudhry, ever since coming into power, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has been largely focused on anti-Pakistan propaganda and ops. The EU Disinfo Lab and Kulbhushan Jadhav are just some of the examples. Do you believe that in doing so, major issues inside India like state boundary disputes and separatist movements due to its discrimination have been ignored and are aggravating?
Yeah, surely 1/3 of India is under an insurgency at any given time. That's a huge amount of India, a space that is covered by Maoists and other insurgencies that are blotting India's landscape. And unfortunately, rather than focus inside India, India and its governments and its prime minister's focus is external, towards Pakistan, towards Kashmir, towards Afghanistan, and in Bhutan, Nepal are the other 2 very recent areas of focus of Indian intransigence, as well as the fact that Myanmar is under no sort of secure position as far as India is concerned. So when you look at the surrounding areas of India and the neighbors of India, India emerges as the main source. And Mr. Modi and his government's focus towards creating more trouble and more strife within the regions of bordering India also means that polarization within India and, of course, the troubles within India will also begin to take head. And that is very obvious. And you heard that, and you mentioned that, the Disinfo Lab and the Kulbhushan Jadhav issue and many other things that India has been generating out of the Afghan soil towards Pakistan all point towards the fact that rather than focus inside, India's focus and Narendra Modi's focus remains outside, and that is what is giving space and creating gaps within the Indian society and the body politic for these kind of problems to emerge.
Mr. Chaudhary, so the Chief Minister of both Assam and Mizoram have been asking Union Home Minister Amit Shah to intervene and end this crisis that had been brewing for almost a month now. Why do you think the BJP government in the center ignored this? Did they misread and underestimate the situation?
Yeah, Home Minister has been busy, following or pursuing the agenda and implementing the agenda of Hindutva all across India. Just in Kashmir, for example, in the recent Eid, when the sacrifice of animals is a part of the ritual, Muslim Islamic ritual on Eid al-Azha, there was an order that came out of the Home Ministry banning the sacrifice of animals. Now, you're stopping a segment of the society or a segment of Indian population from pursuing and following their religious responsibility. No nation that calls itself democratic as well as pursuing or following the human rights standards of the world will ever permit this. So, but that happened. Luckily, some sense prevailed, and there was a backlash, and therefore they had to call it off. So I think Home Minister is busy doing these kind of things, looking at how the courts can be manipulated towards giving the Hindus a greater right over Ayodhya and those kind of issues. So Mr. Amit Shah is actually the emblem of the RSS and the focus of Mr. Modi, and you see that in the person of Amit Shah. And therefore, obviously, he has less and less time for other issues within the nation.
Mr. Shahzad Chaudhary, thank you so much for speaking to Indus News. Now moving on, at least 14 people have been killed in a gun attack in western Niger near the border with Mali. In a statement, the Interior Ministry said unidentified assailants attacked a village in Bani Bangu district. It said the victims include 9 people working in the fields while another was injured. Officials say they have stepped up security measures and an investigation is underway. Bani Bangu falls inside what is known as the 3-border region between Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. It has been the scene of a bloody attacks by terrorist groups for years. At least 57 migrants are presumed dead as their boat capsized in the Mediterranean Sea off the Libyan coast. The UN Migration Agency says 18 people have been rescued by coast guards and fishermen. Spokesperson Safa Mesili said that the boat left Libya's western coastal town of Homs with 75 migrants on board. She said survivors reported at least 20 women and 2 children among those who drowned. She said the vessel reportedly stopped due to an engine problem, then capsized amid bad weather. The United States says it is ready to work with Pakistan in addressing the issues of climate change. U.S. Envoy for Climate, Senator John Kerry, shared this in a meeting with his Pakistani counterpart, Malik Amin Aslam, along the sides of the UN Climate Change Conference in London. Senator Kerry praised Prime Minister Imran Khan's 10 billion tree tsunami project. He said Prime Minister Imran Khan's green vision in dealing with global environmental threats is commendable. Aslam briefed the U.S. Senator on Islamabad's Clean and Green project. He said Islamabad looks forward to working with Washington. American billionaire Jeff Bezos has offered $2 billion to NASA in exchange for a moon mission contract. His company Blue Origin is seeking to make a spacecraft designed to land astronauts back on the moon. In a letter, Bezos said Blue Origin will waive payments in the current fiscal year and the ones after that up to $2 billion. He said the company will also pay for an orbital mission to vet the United States Space Agency's technology. Bezos noted NASA's short-term and long-term lunar ambitions will be delayed without competition. Meanwhile, SpaceX just scored another major contract to launch NASA's Jupiter moon mission. In the United Kingdom, a 19-year-old is paving the way for girls in STEM with plans to set the record for the youngest woman to fly solo around the world. More in this report.
Belgian Zara Rutherford sets off on her 32,000-mile journey in her Shark ultralight plane on August 11. Once complete, she will also become the youngest person to fly the world's fastest microlight aircraft around the world.
So growing up, I didn't really see many female pilots or female computer scientists. Those are two of my passions, and it's quite discouraging when there's no one that can relate to you that does any of those things. So then I wanted to fly around the world, hopefully have other girls see me and think I'd love to fly one day too.
Rutherford's parents, Beatrice de Smet and Sam Rutherford, are both pilots themselves. While her father was excited, her mother says she had mixed feelings when her daughter announced her gap year plans.
Obviously mixed feelings. When she first told me about it, my heart skipped a beat. It took me a bit of time to digest, and now I'm so proud and fully behind her. But as I said, mixed feelings.
The teenager will be funding the trip herself with the help of sponsors and hopes to complete the journey in around 2 to 3 months.
Who said French fries were dorm food? An upscaled version of the dish is sprinkled with gold and sold for a whopping $200 in the United States. More in this report. They are decadent and flavorful and have the aroma of luxurious truffles. And according to Guinness World Records, they are the world's most expensive French fries. They are called the crème de la crème pommes frites, and they cost $200 for a plate at New York City's famous Serendipity 3 restaurant.
So it's a thrice cooked process. So we do a first blanch inside Dom Perignon and a French champagne vinegar. We'll cool it down, and then we will then do the first fry, which is at 325 degrees, and then we will cool that down and finish it off at 375 degrees. So this process is really going to ensure that it has a crispy exterior and a fluffy interior.
The dish is topped off with a sprinkling of 23-karat edible gold dust. This is not Serendipity's first Guinness World Record.
This is our 10th. We have everything from the world's largest wedding cake, the world's most expensive ice cream sundae, the world's most expensive burger, the world's largest cup of hot cocoa. We've done a lot.
Serendipity was closed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and chefs thought the fancy French fries would be a good way to announce their restaurant's return. China's large industrial enterprises have seen a surge in profit growth in the first half of 2021. This follows a stable recovery in the industrial demand and improving business performances. Official data shows these firms amassed a total profit of $651 billion in the first 6 months. The National Bureau of Statistics said the profits are up by almost 67% on year. The NBS noted profits of major industries rose by 45.5% in the first half. In the second quarter, industrial profits rose 36% year on year, up 42.5% from last year. Shares in the Asia-Pacific are trading mixed as major Chinese tech stocks in Hong Kong remain under pressure. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is leading the losses, diving over 2%. Meanwhile, stocks in mainland China have slid over 0.5%. However, Japan's Nikkei 225 and the ASX 200 in Australia have gained nearly 0.5%. Seoul's Kospi has also edged up marginally. It's now time to take a look at the weather updates from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.News.